It started with a knock. Not the kind that echoes like trouble, but a polite, steady rhythm. 3 taps, perfectly spaced. Midnight, the kind of hour where normal people sleep and bad ideas come alive. I reached for the light switch, the pale glow spilling across my kitchen table. Blueprints, files, and a half-empty coffee cup cluttered the wood grain. I've been reviewing surveillance footage for hours. Most people thought I was just a quiet homeowner with too much free time. They didn't know that my security system was more than cameras. It was evidence. The knock came again. Through the peephole, I saw the last person I wanted on my porch. Karen Whitmore, the HOA's self-appointed tyrant, flanked by her husband, Officer Derek Whitmore. She wore her power like perfume. Heavy, suffocating, impossible to ignore. Derek stood behind her, uniform crisp, hand resting near his holster. I opened the door halfway. "Evening, Karen." "Officer." Karen smiled, the kind of smile that could curdle milk. "Evening, Cole. We need to talk." "HOA business." "HOA business doesn't usually involve badges," I said, eyeing her husband. Derek cleared his throat. "Mind if we step inside?" I didn't move. "I do, actually." Karen's eyes narrowed just slightly. That flicker of entitlement when someone says no to her. "Cole, there's been a complaint," she began, flipping open a leather folder. "About your pool. Apparently, you've been using it after curfew and refusing to provide access to the HOA for inspection." "My pool," I said evenly. "My property. And I don't recall signing over my keys to the neighborhood watch." Her tone turned syrupy. "Community policy allows random checks for safety compliance. Show me where it says that." She didn't. Instead, she gestured to Derek. "Honey, would you explain?" He stepped forward, voice calm but heavy. "Sir, I'm here on behalf of my wife and the board. We'd appreciate your cooperation. Just hand over the pool keys. We'll inspect and return them in the morning." The air between us thickened. It was a trap, small, petty, but dangerous. They wanted me to react, to make it official. "Let me get this straight," I said, folding my arms. "The HOA president and her police officer husband are at my door past midnight, demanding keys to my private property with no warrant, no paperwork, and no cause." Karen's smile cracked. "Don't be dramatic. You're part of this community." "I am," I said, "which means I know my rights. You step 1 foot inside, and it becomes criminal trespass." Her lips thinned. "You'll regret that attitude." "Maybe," I said, and shut the door. Behind it, her voice rose, sharp and venomous. "You're not above the rules, Cole." The patrol car idled outside for 2 full minutes before pulling away. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat back at my kitchen table and opened my laptop. The live feeds flickered to life, 6 camera angles, all infrared, all recording. The pool, the fence, the driveway, even the streetlight at the corner. Overkill, some might call it. I called it protection, because Karen and Derek didn't know who they were dealing with. I wasn't just a quiet homeowner. I was Special Agent Cole Harding, currently off duty, undercover for a federal investigation involving public corruption, and Maple Creek's HOA had just crossed a very interesting line. The next morning, sunlight spilled over the fence like a truce that didn't mean a thing. The HOA's email blasted my inbox at 7:14 a.m. Subject: Notice of Noncompliance. Private pool access violation penalty. $500 fine / suspension of HOA privileges action required. Immediate surrender of pool keys for inspection. Signed, of course, by President Karen Whitmore. I sipped my coffee, amused. The move was textbook Karen. Loud, petty, and completely illegal. She wanted to embarrass me, to remind everyone who held the crown in Maple Creek. She'd soon regret it. Around noon, Jim from next door ambled over, hands in his pockets, grin uncertain. "You see the blast?" "Yeah," I said. "They're getting creative." He chuckled nervously. "You know she called a meeting about you, right? Said you were a problem homeowner. Word is, she's pushing for the board to file a police report." "Let her," I said. Jim hesitated, glancing toward my pool. "You always seem calm, man. But she's dangerous. You sure you want to poke that bear?" I smiled faintly. Some bears walk straight into traps. That evening, just before sunset, my driveway cameras caught movement. A familiar SUV pulled up, Karen's silver Lexus. She stepped out alone this time, clipboard in one hand, phone in the other, recording herself like some kind of suburban influencer. I hit record from my laptop. "Hi, neighbors," she chirped, voice bright. "Just conducting a safety inspection on behalf of Maple Creek's HOA." She strutted down my driveway, her heels clicking against the concrete. The camera caught everything, her bypassing the private property sign, unlatching the gate, stepping into my backyard. At 7:08 p.m., she reached the pool. At 7:09, she slipped. Not bad, just a splash, but enough to ruin the hair and dignity she wore like armor. I could hear her shriek even through the speakers. "Oh my God, my phone." I almost laughed, but I stayed quiet, documenting every second. The next morning, she was back, this time with a group. 3 HOA board members, 1 clipboard army, and of course, her husband again, this time in uniform. "Mr. Harding," Derek called out from the curb, his voice carrying the weight of authority. "We need to resolve this." "Funny," I said, stepping onto the porch. "I thought we already did when your wife broke into my property last night." Karen's expression barely twitched. "That was a misunderstanding. You'll delete that footage immediately or face legal action." "Oh, I'll keep it," I said, smiling. "And since you're both so fond of paperwork, I've already sent copies to the HOA members, the city clerk, and my attorney." Derek's jaw tightened. "You're escalating this." I met his stare. "No, officer. You are." There was a long silence before Karen turned away, whispering something I couldn't hear. When they finally left, I exhaled, the tension rolling off my shoulders. Then my burner phone buzzed. Unknown number. Just one message. "Keep the footage safe. You're not the only one watching." M. I stared at it for a long second. M wasn't a neighbor. M was my handler, the only person who knew the real reason I was in Maple Creek. And if he was texting me, it meant one thing. The Whitmores had just become part of a much bigger investigation. The message from M burned on my screen like a silent alarm. "Keep the footage safe. You're not the only one watching." That was all it said. No signature, no encryption tag, nothing else. Which meant this wasn't protocol. M never used unsecure channels unless something urgent had shifted. I stood by the kitchen window, watching sunlight crawl over the rooftops of Maple Creek. The neighborhood looked peaceful, like a photograph pretending it didn't know it was being watched. But I knew better. Karen and Derek weren't just HOA tyrants. They were pressure points in a network I'd been tracing for months. The Bureau suspected someone in local law enforcement had been burying property fraud cases in exchange for money funneled through community development funds. A trail of shell invoices, altered survey maps, and hush-hush deals that made homeowners pay for repairs that never happened. And every single thread seemed to lead back to Maple Creek. I texted him back. "Whitmore's escalating. Trespass confirmed. Video secured." A single reply came seconds later. "Good. Don't engage. They'll make their next move soon. We'll be ready." By late afternoon, Karen was already playing her next hand. A white envelope sat in my mailbox, neat and smug, with the HOA logo embossed in gold. I opened it carefully. Notice of community violation. Unauthorized surveillance equipment visible from public property. Remove within 48 hours or face penalties. I laughed out loud. She was citing my cameras now. The same cameras that caught her breaking into my yard. The audacity was almost impressive. But the timing was what bothered me. It was too fast, too confident. Someone was feeding her intel. At 6 p.m., I opened the garage door and started cleaning, or pretending to. My cameras had picked up her SUV, circling the block twice already. She wasn't subtle, but she was persistent. When she finally stopped across the street, she didn't get out. Instead, Derek stepped out of the passenger side, still in partial uniform. He walked straight to my fence, tapped on the wood post like a man checking a weak spot. Then he looked right at my camera. That small, smug smile told me everything I needed to know. They weren't just harassing me. They were probing, testing how far I'd go before they could twist the story. I kept my distance for 2 days, mowing the lawn, nodding politely at passing cars, pretending to be the quiet neighbor again. But behind the scenes, I was building something. A system. Every night, After the neighborhood lights dimmed, I went to work in my garage. The hum of circuits, the quiet click of a soldering gun, the smell of ozone, familiar, grounding. I modified my cameras, rerouted their feeds through an encrypted relay server, and added a few new decorations to my backyard fence, small black domes disguised as motion sensors. Inside, they house microtransmitters, tools meant for undercover stings, not suburban security. But if Karen wanted to play dirty, I'd show her what compliance really looked like. By the third night, I had a full perimeter grid, motion detection, real-time recording, infrared tracking. Every angle of my yard and fence was mapped and time-stamped. At exactly 1:13 a.m., the grid pinged. 2 figures. Moving slow. I zoomed in, Derek and another man. Not in uniform. Shovels in hand. They were digging. Right near the property line. I watched them on my monitor, calm but cold, as Derek adjusted a stake and shifted it nearly 2 feet toward my yard. They weren't vandalizing. They were redrawing. On paper, that meant the HOA could claim the new boundary. When they left, I waited 15 minutes before stepping outside. I took photos, measurements, timestamps, GPS coordinates, everything. Then I sent it to M. Cole, caught the moving property stakes. Got footage. M. Perfect. Stay passive. Local PD link confirmed. This is bigger than HOA. Cole, how big? M. Enough that the feds just greenlit Maple Creek as an active investigation zone. Keep acting normal. Normal. Sure. The next morning, I woke up to find Karen on my lawn again. This time wearing sunglasses, holding a stack of papers, and performing for an audience. She had her phone on live stream mode, narrating like a talk show host. Good morning, neighbors. Just documenting community violations. This homeowner has been obstructing public pathways and installing illegal equipment. I stepped out with my coffee. Calm. Steady. Morning, President Whitmore. She lowered her phone, smile brittle. Cole, didn't see you there. Seems like you see everything, I said, nodding to the camera in her hand. You live streaming from my property now. Public documentation, she said sweetly. For safety, I smiled. Then let's make it official. I turned my phone toward her, started recording too. For my safety, her face tightened. You're making a mistake. Maybe, I said, but at least mine's on camera. She stormed off after 30 seconds, muttering about fines and compliance. The second she drove off, I uploaded both videos, hers and mine, to a secure cloud. A mirror copy went straight to him. That evening, I wasn't surprised when 2 black SUVs parked down the street. Federal issue. Quiet engines. Government plates. M had moved fast. He stepped out himself, wearing the same leather jacket he'd worn when I first met him. He looked like someone who belonged in every room and nowhere at once. Busy week, he said, glancing toward Karen's house. Your footage confirms what we needed. Derek's been burying boundary complaints for kickbacks. HOA fines are the laundering front. I cross my arms. And his wife. She's the delivery system. HOA violations, property adjustments, fake citations, all ways to justify the accounting gaps. It's brilliant in a small town kind of way. I nodded toward the black SUVs. You here to take them down? M shook his head. Not yet. We need them to make one more move. And they will. They think they've got leverage on you. Because of the pool? I asked. He smirked. Because you made her look stupid in front of her followers. People like that always retaliate. He handed me a slim folder. Inside's a warrant draft and your next step. If they try to confiscate anything from your property, especially your pool keys, you let them. Let happen. Just make sure your cameras are rolling. You want them to incriminate themselves, I said. Exactly. He stepped closer, voice low. You've been undercover long enough to know how this goes, Cole. Sometimes you don't expose corruption by fighting it head on. You let it expose itself. Then he paused, almost smiling. Besides, I have a feeling Karen's ego is about to write a check the law can finally cash. That night, as the neighborhood lights flickered out one by one, I sat by the pool in silence. The water reflected the stars, calm, undisturbed. My cameras blinked quietly in the dark. Somewhere across the street, a phone buzzed, and a voice, Karen's, hissed through the night air. Tomorrow morning, we're going to teach him a lesson he won't forget. And right then, I knew the setup was complete. She'd walked straight into her own trap. By dawn, Maple Creek looked innocent again. Sprinklers whispered. Birds rehearsed their songs. The kind of calm that hides the storm. I brew my coffee and watch the feeds. Every camera angle sharp, time-stamped, backed up to 3 separate drives. M's voice echoed in my head. Let them make the next move. They did. At exactly 9:42 a.m., Karen's silver Lexus rolled up, right on schedule. She wasn't alone this time. 3 HOA board members followed in a second SUV, and behind them, the familiar black and white of Derek's patrol car. It was a parade of arrogance. I stepped out onto the porch as Karen strutted down my driveway. Clipboard in one hand, her smile polished to a shine. "Good morning, Mr. Harding," she called, voice loud enough for the cameras. "We're here for a compliance inspection." I took a slow sip of coffee. "Funny, you usually send an email first." "Oh, we did," she said, brandishing a sheet of paper. "You failed to respond." She passed it to me. It was the same notice from 2 days ago, reprinted and stamped final warning. Derek stood a few paces behind, sunglasses on, posture stiff. He wasn't looking at me. He was scanning my property like he was casing it. "Let's keep this civil," Karen said, stepping closer. "All we need is access to your pool keys." Standard HOA safety check. There it was. The play M predicted. I handed her the ring of keys, perfectly calm. "Knock yourself out." Karen blinked, momentarily thrown off balance. "Excuse me, you want to inspect? Go ahead. Everything's compliant. Take all the time you need." Her smile flickered. She didn't expect cooperation. She expected defiance. "Fine," she said, recovering. "Derek, please assist." He nodded and followed her through the side gate. My gate. The camera above it blinked red. Recording. They stopped at the pool, whispering, checking things that didn't need checking. Karen made a big show of pointing, gesturing to her clipboard, occasionally glancing back to see if I was watching. I wasn't. I was watching them, from my laptop, 3 live angles, audio synced. At 9:57 a.m., Derek slipped a small black pouch from his jacket pocket. He knelt by the filter box and pretended to inspect it. I zoomed in. The frame froze long enough to show what was inside. A vial. My jaw tightened. It looked like a chemical bottle, the kind used in pool maintenance kits, except the label was scratched out. He poured it into the water. Karen smiled. "That should do." I didn't move, didn't shout, didn't even breathe too loudly, because now they were on camera planting evidence. They walked back to the patio, pretending nothing had happened. Karen tapped her clipboard. "Inspection complete. You'll receive notice of violation within 48 hours. "Violation?" I asked mildly. "Possible contamination," she said sweetly. "Until further notice, your pool's closed. For safety, of course." She turned to leave, handing me my keys. Her fingers brushed mine, cold, deliberate. "You should have just followed the rules, Cole." They left. I waited until the sound of their engines faded before I exhaled. My hands were steady. My pulse wasn't. An hour later, my phone buzzed. It was M. "We saw it. Excellent work. Don't touch the pool. Agents inbound." Within 30 minutes, 2 dark SUVs rolled into Maple Creek. The same kind as before, unmarked, quiet. A man and a woman stepped out. Not him this time. New faces. Professional calm. "Special Agent Rivera," the woman said, flashing her badge. "FBI Environmental Crimes Unit." "Agent Cole Harding," I replied quietly. "Undercover, reporting incident." She nodded. "We've reviewed your feed. It's clean. They just committed felony evidence tampering and false contamination reporting. We'll move today." I led them to the backyard. The vial residue shimmered faintly on the water's surface. A light film, harmless but traceable. Rivera's partner took samples, sealed them in evidence bags, labeled each with the exact timestamp. Rivera looked around. "Your setup's impressive. You built this yourself." I nodded. "Electrician before I joined the bureau. Old habits die hard." She smiled faintly. "Good. It's airtight. Once the lab confirms the compound's origin, we'll have enough to charge both of them." I frowned. "What do you mean, compound's origin?" Rivera exchanged a look with her partner. "We think the same chemical's been showing up in city-stored facilities, under Karen's HOA procurement orders. That means embezzlement, misappropriation, and now obstruction. I felt a grim satisfaction settle in. The perfect storm. By afternoon, the news had already started to ripple through the neighborhood. The sight of 3 FBI vehicles outside my house drew a small, hungry crowd. Phones out. Whispers spreading like wildfire. Karen's Lexus pulled up fast. She jumped out, face pale beneath her sunglasses. "What the hell is going on here?" she snapped. Rivera turned calmly. "Ma'am, federal agents. Please step back." Karen laughed, high and brittle. "Federal? Don't be ridiculous. This is an HOA matter." Rivera held up her badge. "Not anymore. You're under investigation for evidence tampering, property fraud, and conspiracy to obstruct a federal inquiry." Derek arrived seconds later, lights flashing on his patrol car, uniform pristine, but his composure cracked. "Agent, with all due respect." "Officer Whitmore," Rivera interrupted smoothly, "you are also a subject of this investigation. I suggest you don't finish that sentence." He froze. Karen rounded on me. "You did this. You set us up." I met her glare evenly. "No, Karen. You set yourself up. I just hit record." She lunged forward, but Rivera's partner stepped between us. The whole street was filming now. Neighbors who'd once smiled politely, now capturing the downfall of the Queen of Maple Creek. Derek tried to speak again, but Rivera's voice cut through the chaos. "You both are free to contact legal counsel. You are not free to leave town." Karen looked like she'd swallow glass. "This is harassment." "Harassment," Rivera said, folding her badge away, "is when you weaponize a homeowners association to intimidate people. This is accountability." By sunset, the vehicles were gone. The Whitmores retreated inside their perfect white house, blinds drawn tight. The neighborhood had fallen into that stunned silence that only happens when power shifts. Jim wandered over, eyes wide. "So, FBI, huh?" I smiled faintly. "Something like that." He laughed, shaking his head. "Man, I knew she was bad news, but this? You've turned Maple Creek into a crime show." "Yeah," I said, watching the sun dip behind Karen's roof. "But this episode's almost over." At 8:17 p.m., my phone buzzed again. Solid work. They'll panic. Expect retaliation. Keep the system armed." "What kind?" I typed. "Desperation kind. Karen won't go quietly." He was right. At 10:03 p.m., my motion alarms went off. I opened the feed, 2 shadows near my gate. One tall, one smaller. The smaller one carried a gas can. They weren't subtle this time. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped quietly to the back door, but before I could open it, flashing red lights cut through the dark. Patrol cars, 3 of them. They hadn't come for me. They'd come for the Whitmores. Through the lens of my camera, I saw the impossible. Derek being pulled aside, handcuffed, shouting something about mistakes and false charges. Karen screaming, mascara running, clutching her phone as if live streaming could still save her. Officer Ruiz, one of Derek's own, read them their rights. For a moment, even I felt a twinge of pity. But justice, like current, follows the path of least resistance, and theirs had finally shorted out. When the last cruiser left, the night felt heavier but cleaner. The pool shimmered under the moonlight, clear again, untouched. I sat by it with a quiet satisfaction. Texted one last time. Operation HOA complete. Excellent work. Debrief tomorrow. I typed back. Copy that. Maple Creek's quiet again. But as I looked toward the Whitmores' dark house, one thought lingered. Peace never lasts long in a place built on control. And something told me this wasn't over. The morning after their arrest, Maple Creek was quieter than I'd ever heard it. No sprinklers, no lawn mowers, just the faint hum of engines from people slowing down to stare at the Whitmores' house. A forensic investigation, tape fluttered in the breeze, bright yellow against their white picket fence. The Queen's castle had turned into a crime scene. I poured myself a cup of coffee and stepped out onto the porch. For once, the street smelled like dew and dust, not tension. Jim wandered over, his hands stuffed into his jacket pockets. "Well, Cole," he said, grinning, "you sure know how to clean up a neighborhood." I chuckled. "I didn't clean it up, Jim. I just turned the lights on." He laughed, but there was a nervous edge to it. "You think they'll stay gone?" I didn't answer. Because people like Karen don't just go away. They fester. They find new corners to hide in. By noon, the news vans had arrived. A cluster of them parked right in front of the HOA clubhouse. Reporters with perfect hair and eager smiles rehearsed their lines. Sources confirmed the arrest of HOA President Karen Whitmore and her husband, Officer Derek Whitmore. One anchor recited. Federal investigators allege years of embezzlement, document forgery, and abuse of municipal authority. They called it the Maple Creek scandal. Neighbors lined up on the sidewalks, whispering, filming. Everyone wanted a piece of the spectacle. But behind the gossip, something deeper was brewing, a collective guilt. For years, everyone had played along, paid fines, laughed nervously at Karen's insults, let her rewrite property lines and pocket HOA dues without question. Now that it was over, people realized they'd helped build her throne, and they wanted redemption. At 3 p.m., Agent Rivera showed up again, sunglasses off, paperwork in hand. "Cole," she said, nodding toward the porch, "you might want to sit down for this." I let her inside. She glanced around, taking in the wall of monitors, the piles of labeled evidence, the tidy coil of extension cords hanging beside the window. "You're very methodical," she said. "Occupational hazard," I replied. She smiled faintly, then opened her folder. The lab results came in. That vial Derek used? It wasn't random. It contained trace compounds matching material from a city storage facility, the same one Karen had exclusive access to through her HOA contract. I frowned. "So, they were stealing from the city, too?" Rivera nodded. "Yes, but there's more. We found falsified invoices, missing community funds, and fake vendor accounts that point to a much larger operation. They were laundering money through multiple HOAs. Yours was just the one they controlled personally." My stomach sank. So Maple Creek wasn't the only victim. "No," Rivera said softly. "You just happened to catch them first." She stood, closing the folder. "The Bureau's moving in on 3 other neighborhoods today. Your footage helped us connect the dots." That hit me harder than I expected. I've been focused on my yard, my fence, my line. I hadn't realized I'd stepped into something bigger than revenge. "Cole," she added, "you did the right thing. But your cover's probably blown. The Bureau will reassign you soon." I looked out the window, at the yellow tape, the empty street, the quiet that didn't feel like peace anymore. "Reassignment, huh?" She gave a sympathetic smile. "You've earned a vacation." The following week, Maple Creek tried to move on. The HOA board was dissolved pending investigation. The clubhouse stayed locked. And slowly, the neighborhood began to breathe again. People started mowing their own lawns without fear of citations. Kids rode bikes where no trespassing signs used to hang. It felt normal, for a while, until the letters arrived. Identical envelopes slipped under every door, each stamped with the HOA logo, but unsigned. Inside, "We know what you did." No signature, no return address. Jim found his first, then Rita, then me. Rivera sent a team to analyze the paper and ink, but they couldn't trace it. Whoever sent them knew how to stay invisible. That night, I rechecked every camera angle, every motion sensor. The feeds were clean. No intrusions. No movement. But something in my gut told me it wasn't over. 2 nights later, a motion alert pinged at 1:14 a.m. Camera 3, the back fence. I opened the feed. A shadow moved just beyond the property line. Slow, cautious, watching. The figure paused near the gate, then stepped closer. The porch light caught a glimpse of her face. Karen. She looked different, thinner, angrier, a ghost of herself. Her hair was tied back messily, her eyes hollow but burning. She was holding something metallic in her hand. I muted the mic and called Rivera immediately. She answered groggily. "Harding, she's here," I said. Her tone sharpened instantly. "Stay inside. Units are 3 minutes out." Karen approached the pool, muttering to herself. I boosted the mic volume. "Think you can ruin me? You think you can make me disappear? You don't get to win." She lifted the metal object, a crowbar, and swung it against the filter box. The sound of shattering plastic echoed through the night. "Karen, stop!" I shouted through the intercom. She froze, looking around wildly. "You," she screamed. You took everything from me. The distant wail of sirens filled the air. Karen dropped the crowbar, spinning toward the noise, panic flashing across her face. When the first cruiser screeched to a stop at the curb, she bolted, vaulting the fence like a cornered animal. Officers chased her into the dark, their flashlights cutting across the lawn like search beams. By the time they caught her, she was barefoot, bleeding, and sobbing incoherently about agents and plots. They said she'd been evicted after Derek's conviction, that she'd been staying in a motel, spiraling. The bureau took her quietly that night. I watched from the window, the adrenaline slowly ebbing, replaced by a cold, hollow relief. The next morning, Rivera came by again. She's in custody, she said simply. Psych evaluation's pending. The district attorney will likely add charges for vandalism and trespassing, but honestly, she's finished. I nodded. What about Derek? Still in holding, facing fraud, tampering, and obstruction. He'll talk eventually. They always do. I stared at the pool, now quiet again, reflecting the morning light. This started over a gate, I murmured. A stupid wooden gate. Rivera's eyes softened. It always starts small. People like her think boundaries are suggestions until someone reminds them they're laws. She slipped an envelope onto the table. For you. Bureau commendation and relocation notice. You did good, Cole. Time to move on. I picked it up but didn't open it. In the neighborhood? She smiled faintly. That's the best part. Without fear, people tend to govern themselves just fine. By the end of the week, the yellow tape came down. The lawn grew green again. The HOA sign was removed. And for the first time in years, the residents of Maple Creek met without rules. Just neighbors with stories, laughter, and too much food. Jim raised a glass of lemonade. To boundaries, he said. I lifted mine. To keeping them. That night, I sat alone by the pool, watching the reflections dance on the surface. My laptop hummed quietly beside me, the feed still running, the lights still armed. Old habits, I guess. The quiet wasn't total peace. It was the kind that hums under your skin, the kind that comes after a storm.
Hold on, let's look at the original document.
Just as I stood to go inside.
Officer,
HQ approved your relocation.
Investigator,
But
hold
there's
the
something
drone
you
footage
should
from the
know.
last 48 hours.
Karen's laptop had
we have a very
encrypted
small window
files.
here.
HOA wasn't the end. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I typed back. So it's bigger. Much bigger, he replied. We'll talk soon. I looked out at the street one last time. The same street that had once been ruled by fear, now finally calm. And somewhere in the back of my mind, I knew peace was just the intermission. The message from M glowed on my screen like a warning flare in the dark. We'll talk soon. That was all it said. Short, coded, but loaded with implication.
Get off
I knew
my
what
property!
it meant. Maple Creek had been the tip of
for
the spear,
trespassing
the
right
visible
now.
rot on something much deeper. I closed the laptop and stared out at the pool. The water was calm again, rippling faintly under the porch lights. A perfect mirror, except I couldn't stop seeing the faces of everyone who'd lived in fear of the Whitmores. The next morning, I packed. A few essentials. The data drives. The binder with every photo, email, and timestamp. And one small token, a piece of the old ranch gate that had started it all. I didn't know where I was going, but I had to sense this wasn't an ending. It was the beginning of something wider, uglier, and far more organized. 3 days later, I sat across from M in a diner off Highway 17. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in weeks. Gray suit, tired eyes, coffee gone cold. Maple Creek was one of 7, he said, sliding a file across the table. Karen and Derek were part of a network using HOA accounts as laundering channels. They manipulate permits, inflate maintenance contracts, and reroute public funds into shell companies. I opened the folder. Inside were photos, signatures, and balance sheets. The names weren't familiar yet, but one logo caught my eye. Atlas Property Group. That's the developer who built Maple Creek, I said quietly. M nodded. They've been building similar communities for over a decade. We think each one had a Karen. Someone local, someone loud, someone the residents would never suspect. All following the same pattern. He paused, letting that sink in. You didn't just expose corruption in a neighborhood, Cole. You cracked open a federal-level fraud ring. And now we need you back in. I leaned back in the booth, heart hammering. You want me to go undercover again? M's gaze didn't waver. You're already in the system. You've got the experience, the face of a homeowner, and the patience to play the long game. We'll back you this time. Full clearance. I looked out the window. The reflection of a neon sign flickered across the glass. Open 24 hours. That felt poetic. Justice had no closing time. 6 weeks later, I moved into a new development called Silverwood Estates under the alias Mark Daniels. Different state. Same story. Perfect lawns. Identical mailboxes. Smiling neighbors who peeked through curtains. And, of course, an HOA president who already thought she was royalty. Her name was Linda Bray. Late 40s, always in heels, her perfume noticeable half a block away. At my first community meeting, she smiled with too many teeth and said, "We like to keep things orderly here, Mr. Daniels." No surprises. I smiled back. Neither do I. M's words echoed in my ear as I scanned the room. Hidden cameras disguised as smoke detectors, a recording pen in my jacket pocket. Document everything. Same pattern, same tactics. But this time we'll be watching too. It didn't take long. Linda ran the HOA like a personal empire. Every new homeowner had to buy maintenance packages that didn't exist. Every contractor she hired was paid by a ghost company. By the end of month 2, I had enough footage to build a case. But there was something else, something new. One evening, while reviewing security footage, I noticed a familiar face in the background of a board meeting video. Tall man, dark hair, sunglasses inside the clubhouse. I paused the frame and zoomed in. Derek Whitmore. My pulse froze. He shouldn't have been out of prison. His trial hadn't even finished. I ran the image through our bureau database. Match confirmed. Released under witness protection, but under a different alias. I called M immediately. "You didn't tell me Derek was out." M's voice came through tense. "He wasn't supposed to be anywhere near another HOA. If he's there, someone higher up is pulling strings." "Atlas property?" I asked. "Most likely," he said grimly. "Cole, listen. Do not engage him directly. We're preparing a coordinated sting. Stay in place until we move." I stared at the pause screen, Derek smiling behind Linda Bray, shaking her hand. It was the same smile he'd worn when he thought he owned Maple Creek. Over the next 2 weeks, I pretended to settle in. Mowing the lawn, attending meetings, quietly installing more cameras. The pattern repeated itself like clockwork. Fake invoices, ghost employees, forged city permits, all stamped with the same Atlas insignia. Every night, I uploaded my data to bureau servers. Every morning, I got another message from M. "Stay patient. Don't spook them. We're almost there." But patience only stretches so far. Because one night, around midnight, I heard a familiar noise outside, tires crunching gravel, followed by a gate creaking open. I checked the feed. It was Linda's car pulling up to my driveway. Then I saw him. Derek. He stepped out of the passenger seat, looked straight into the camera, and smiled. I stayed still, breathing shallow, watching the feed as they whispered near the garage door. Then Linda said, "He's the one, right? The guy from Maple Creek." Derek nodded. "Yeah, same guy. The feds moved him here, thought they could use him. But guess what? We still own the system." Linda glanced around nervously. "Should we?" "Not here," Derek interrupted. "He's recording. We'll handle it our way." I hit record on my audio line and texted M one word. Compromised. Within minutes, I was on the phone with Rivera. She was now heading the task force. "Stay locked down," she ordered. "We're 5 minutes out." Outside, Derek and Linda walked around the garage, inspecting something. I couldn't hear what, until Derek's voice rose again. "You think you can expose us twice, Cole? So much for aliases." He kicked the side of my car, shouting, "Come out, hero." The porch lights snapped on automatically, and the motion-triggered Siren Mason had helped me design back in Maple Creek started blaring. They flinched. Then they ran. The FBI units arrived seconds later, silent, efficient, tactical. Rivera herself led the raid. Within hours, Atlas Property Group's local office was seized. Hard drives, records, offshore accounts, everything connected. Derek was arrested again, this time with evidence so solid he'd never breathe free air again. Linda, too, defiant until the end, screaming that she owned this town. But when Rivera dropped a stack of bank statements in front of her, she went quiet. The network fell apart within days. Atlas executives were indicted. 3 other HOA queens were arrested across state lines. And the Bureau credited the entire operation to one thing: the Maple Creek case. When it was over, Rivera visited me one last time. "Congratulations, Agent Harding," she said, shaking my hand. "You closed it." I smiled faintly. "Feels strange, doesn't it? Winning." She looked around my new home. Quiet, simple, unguarded. "You ever think about settling down for real?" I laughed softly. "Maybe someday, after the world stops needing fences." She grinned. "That'll be the day." That evening, I walked out to the porch. The air was cool, peaceful. For the first time in years, there was no tension humming under my skin. I sat with a drink, looking at the gate, freshly painted, perfectly aligned. And I thought of Karen, of Derek, of all the others who thought power meant permission. They forgot something simple. Boundaries aren't about control. They're about respect. And when you forget that someone, somewhere, is documenting everything. The porch light flickered once, catching on a metal sign I'd brought from Maple Creek. It read, "Private property, respect boundaries." I raised my glass to it. Then, somewhere in the night, my phone buzzed again. New message from M. Got another lead. HOA in Arizona. "You in?" I stared at the glowing screen, smiled, and typed back one word. "Always."